So much like the lion, I have arisen from my 10,000 year slumber to bring you some more Warhammer lore. And what better than to cover how a Space Marine was made? Yes, I've hit that point in my career that every Warhammer YouTuber makes a video about how a Space Marine is made, their organization patterns, and the difference between a fucking Primaris and a Firstborn. So let's get into it. So the way this video is going to be structured is I'm going to give you a brief overview of what a Space Marine is, and then I'm going to go into the phases on how they make the Space Marines, and then towards the end of the video, I will go through how their organization works, as well as how you tell which is which. So without further ado, I'm Elite, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you like the content, do hit the subscribe button, hit a like, leave a comment hating on me because I'm definitely wrong, and so Pontius can come after me for being a shit YouTuber. So what is a Space Marine? Well, you've probably seen them on the box art. They're the big blue guys, but they're not always blue. They are your typical super soldiers, but sprinkled with autism and the grim darkness of the far future, where everything has to be horrifically graphic. Space Marines are typically made in about 19 phases or surgeries. It can vary from chapter to chapter, which I'll get to in a minute, but it's typically between 19-20 phases. There might be a few extra steps for different chapters who have different cultural beliefs. Now, to become a Space Marine, you have to get chosen. You can't just become a Space Marine. There is a lot of genetic bullfuckery involved, and if you do not have the correct genetics to become a Space Marine, you will literally be thrown out, or if you're already in the process of becoming a Space Marine, they will kill you, or they will turn you into a chapter serf, which is basically just a servant. They're also typically called initiates instead of recruits. The term is interchangeable, and it typically starts when they are between 10 and 14. Any older than that and it gets very, very complicated, and that is something we'll touch on a little bit later. So typically the first implant that they will receive is the secondary heart. Yes, you heard me correctly, Space Marines have two hearts. Why is this? It's because they are genetically human walking tanks, and you need a lot of blood to get around as a tank. But realistically, Space Marines are about 7 to 8 feet tall. The Primaris are even bigger. So you'd need a secondary heart to help pump blood around, oxygen around, otherwise every other organ would fail because a singular human heart cannot pump the amount of blood at the necessary rates to keep a Space Marine alive. The second implant that they receive is called an osmodular. Now, this is a tube-like organ as it's described, and it is responsible for secreting hormones that improve muscle and bone growth, and it also allows them to absorb ceramic-based chemicals that are put in their diets to help them grow stronger bone densities, because Space Marine bones are basically unbreakable in normal circumstances. It's also stated that around 2 years after the osmodular is implanted into a Space Marine initiate, that their bones and their muscle mass have increased significantly, their bones have lengthened, and most interesting of all, their ribcage has fused into a solid plate of ceramic-like bone, which is almost bulletproof. It is not stated how the lungs function with a solid piece of bone in front of them, but this is also not physically possible to have a second heart, so we can just ignore that. Now we move on to phase 3, but sometimes phase 2 and 3 are done at the exact same time, and this is a implant called the Boscopia, and this is the one that secretes hormones to increase muscle generation and growth, and it is implanted into the chest cavity. I believe it's somewhere over the first heart. This is also an organ that tends to help prepare the body for other implants on a hormonal basis. Because these are organs, they can reject the body and kill someone, and it does happen very often. Now, this is the part of the video that might start to confuse people, because there is a difference between the types of Space Marines. There are Firstborn Space Marines, which follow how the Emperor made Space Marines, and there are new Primaris Space Marines, who are bigger and stronger and technically better in every way. These Primaris also have additional organs that the Firstborns do not have, but they can be implanted in them to make Firstborn Primaris Marines. So I will quickly talk about that as well, as there are 3 additional organs that would be put into a Primaris Marine at this point in time. So Phase 3 Alpha is listed as the sinew coils. These are essentially coils that go through the muscles, making them even stronger than they were before, and giving extremely increased strength to the point where an unarmored Primaris Space Marine is as strong as a normal Firstborn Space Marine. It also makes it so they're harder to actually penetrate the muscles, which is very interesting considering these guys are put in armor 99% of the time. Phase 3 Beta is also known as the Magnificat. I'm just gonna say it's the Magnificent. It's described as a thumbnail-sized lobe that is inserted into the middle of the brain, and this secretes hormones once again. Damn, there's a lot of hormones in this shit that affect the osmodula and the Bischepia very effectively, that make them produce even more hormones to grow bigger. These guys are making prime bodybuilder Arnold Schwarzenegger look like he is a child. Like, these guys are huge. Now, the last of the Phase 3 Primaris stuff, or organs that we have to talk about, is called the Belisarian Furnace. Now, there isn't much known about this. It is placed directly between the first and second hearts, and it can be activated as a last resort to boost a Primaris Marine on the brink of death to survive it. This will most likely kill the Marine, but they'll get a boost of strength to do whatever they have to do. It can also be recharged somehow. It's not really explained, but it will be recharged over time before it can be activated again. So if they use it, survive, get away, they can't use it again if they're captured. Now, Phase 4 begins with the Hemastodon. It's basically an organ that's implanted in the main circulatory system, and it increases hemoglobin in the subject's blood, making it so that they carry oxygen more efficiently. It also makes the blood more vibrant and vivid. It also helps control the implants that we discussed in Phase 2 and Phase 3, as they will all work together to make the subject bigger, stronger, and function normally. Ooh, Phase 5, we're getting interesting with the Larraman's organ. This is a liver-shaped organ that is placed into the chest cavity, and it is connected to the bloodstream. What this does is it helps produce more white blood cells. If you don't know what white blood cells do, they help clot blood, like bleeding. So if you cut yourself and you have a scar or a scab on it, that is because your white blood cells have basically made a shield to protect that while they heal the skin underneath. Space Marines can literally have their arm cut off and they will stop bleeding within seconds because their Larraman cells are so fucking strong that it just scabs over immediately. It is very nutty. So basically, if a Space Marine was cooking, they obviously don't cook, but if they were and they cut their finger, it would immediately scab over and heal within a few minutes. Now we move on to Phase 6, which is the catalepsian node. Now, the catalepsian node is implanted in the back of the brain and actually allows a Space Marine to shut off portions of their brain so that they can go longer without sleep. Now, it should be noted that this does not remove the need for a Space Marine to sleep. They still have to sleep at some point, but it means that they can go weeks to months without sleep. And this is kind of game changing for Space Marines because they are actively in combat for such long periods that they need to be able to just shut off and keep doing what they're doing. But on top of that, it also means that they don't need as much sleep. They can sleep for as little as 4 hours, and that is essentially a good night's rest to them. And typically that is how long they sleep for. Phase 7 is the Preominor, which is essentially a secondary stomach, but it doesn't digest things. It actually searches for poisons and anything that could like infect a Space Marine via ingestion, and it gets rid of them. It's kind of like a kidney in a way, but the difference is that it specifically looks out for poisons, which is why Space Marines are so intolerant to poisons, how they can just deal with them. Now, Phase 8 is a little bit gruesome, so if you're a bit squeamish, turn away now. We're talking about the Omophagia, which is probably the most famous Space Marine organ besides the progenoid glands, which I'll get to in a bit. Now, the Omophagia actually allows a Space Marine to eat part of a person or an alien or whoever, most of the time their brains, and then they can access the memories of those who they ate. It is very, very gruesome. It is very grimdark. And there is a great scene in Echoes of Eternity where Sanguinius makes one of the Blood Angels eat some brains because he killed the guy. I'll go into it in another video. This organ is usually located in the spine, or it is a kind of nerve link from the stomach to the spine. It's very weird. I don't think it is physically possible to do. Now for a less gruesome part, Phase 9, the Multi-Lung. It is exactly what it sounds like. They get a third lung. They have a third artificial lung that helps them breathe in low oxygen atmospheres. And it can also, like, they can just shut off their normal lungs and only breathe out of the third lung. It is kind of wild. They can breathe underwater apparently for brief amounts of time. It's also apparently highly effective against airborne toxins, which is handy, I guess. Now for Phase 11, the Laraman's Ear. This essentially makes it so Space Marines can't get dizzy or motion sick, which is very, very handy. But it also does another thing which lets them filter out sound consciously. This basically lets them distinguish what sound they want to hear, and then they can only hear that and they can pick it out. This is something that I haven't really seen used in the lore, apart from the dizziness and motion sickness part. That's used all the time. But it basically replaces their entire ear canal and eardrum from a normal human's. Now for the Susan membrane, this is a membrane that actually goes over their brain and is absorbed into their brain over a period of time using chemical therapy. What this does is allows them to go into suspended animation, essentially cryosleep, when they've suffered extreme trauma to their body. The downside to this is the only way to come out of it is to be brought out of it by someone else, usually a Space Marine apothecary. And just a quick fact, the longest recorded period spent in suspended animation was undertaken by Brother Silar of the Dark Angels, who was revived after 567 years. Now for Phase 13, the Melanchromatic Organ. I think that's how you say it. This quite literally just changes the melanin levels in a marine's skin. When they are exposed to harsher sunlight, their skin will darken to compensate and also protects Marines from other forms of radiation, which is pretty cool. We've almost made it. If you need a break, go grab a glass of milk. If not, let's continue into Phase 14, the Autolytic Kidney. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a third kidney that is just more efficient than the rest. It can filter out poisons and other toxins very, very quickly. On the downside, it makes it so Space Marines can't get drunk. And I'm not even kidding, because alcohol is seen as a toxin. Like, fun fact, the Space Wolves, who are Space Vikings basically, literally make poison to get drunk on. Because their autolytic kidney and their stomach are just too damn good. This is is a organ that enhances the sense of taste to such a degree that they can identify what the food is made of, basically. Or if it's like a meat, what the meat is cooked in. They can literally taste how something was made. It also technically enhances their sense of smell to a grand old degree. There is a point in one of the Night Lord books where he can smell that a pair of humans had sex recently. Now for phase 16, we have the murinoid gland. This allows a space marine to sweat a substance that coats their skin and offers resistance to heat or cold. This is an organ that they have no control over, much like our own sweat glands. They have to be provided by outside forces before they can actually use it, more or less. Now for phase 17, we have probably the most famous space marine organ around, the Belcher's gland. These are two glands that are implanted into the mouth that make a salivary-like substance. The difference is this substance can melt through almost anything. They can spit acid. Space Marines can literally spit acid. And from memory, this also allows them to eat almost anything. Like, they can quite literally eat rocks and metal because their teeth are enhanced so they won't break, and the acid will literally just melt it so they can just go on chewing. Now, we're going to stop here for a second so I can explain what a progenoid gland is and what the term gene seed means. So, phase 18 is the progenoid gland. This is a gland that is very, very vital to the future of a chapter of Space Marines and future Space Marines being made. Basically, this is a organ that is either in the chest or the neck, sometimes both, and it allows them to grow more gene seed. What is gene seed? It's everything that we've been talking about, the enhanced organs, the alien-like organs that they implant. They are what is considered gene seed. Now, moving on to our final implant, phase 19, the black carapace. This is essentially the final step in becoming a Space Marine. This is when you get your armor, and this is when you officially become a battle brother. This is a plastic-like material that goes underneath the skin, but between the muscle fibers, and it is what allows you to interface with your battle armor, as well as other machinery that you might be plugged into. Now, that's all the traditional steps, but, and I'm going to discuss this quickly before I talk about it, different chapters do things different ways. Now, you probably been wondering, what's a chapter? A chapter is basically a group of 1,000 Space Marines who wear the same armor color and trim and follow a hierarchy, and they are the army that you like play as on the tabletop and most of the factions, I guess. Now, there's varying chapters and I'll go through it in another video, but all you need to know is each chapter does things differently. For example, there is a phase 0 for the Space Wolves and a phase 0 for the Blood Angels, 2 chapters. The Space Wolves actually have a different helix in their DNA called the Canis helix, which gives them more wolf-like qualities. So their canines are bigger, they have more hair, and they are very quote-unquote feral. The Blood Angels are also different, where they don't do it in the 20 phases. The way Space Marine Blood Angel neophytes and initiates do things is that they will go through the training for about 3 to 5 years, and then they will be tested one last time, and then they'll be brought before a chalice where they will drink blood. And yes, I mean literal blood. Blood Angels are space vampires, and that will put them into a sleep for 2 years. During that 2 years, they are implanted with every organ besides the black carapace and shoved into a coffin full of blood for the next 2 years. And when they come out, they'll be a fully grown Space Marine. That is literally what they do. It's part of their cult. Now, I could make a separate video about each and every superhuman in the Imperium, but instead I'm going to keep it to this video. We're going to quickly talk about the Custodes because they don't have much lore in their creation, but we can talk about them. Now, I want you to think about it like this. You have the free subscription, which would be humanity. You have the premium subscription, which is Space Marines, because they are like humanity plus, they're better than humans in every way. The Custodies are the premium plus subscription because they are better than Space Marines in every way, and they will absolutely tear every Space Marine apart. We don't actually know too much about how Custodies are made. It's a very, very closely guarded secret, but we do know it takes a very long time, and instead of being inducted around 10 to 14 to begin their training, they are inducted from birth and genetically altered at birth to become Custodian Guards. Now, in lore, we recently found out that Custodian Guards are actually functionally immortal. They cannot functionally die or age. Things like the Space Marines, for example, they will function forever. They won't just stop working. They will slow down eventually, but the Custodians will never slow down unless it is outside injuries slowing them down. And when I said that they are better than Space Marines than everywhere, I meant it. There is a scene in The End and the Death where someone watches a Custodian's, like, he had a chunk torn out of his shoulder. He watches it regrow, knit together, and look like there was never anything there. They don't scar easily. Custodians are also generally bigger. They are around the 10 feet tall mark. And they are so prolific in combat that it looks like they leave openings when they know that there are not openings. Oh, and by the way, I'm just going to throw out the numbers here. There are roughly 10,000 Custodians in the galaxy at any given time, opposed to the Space Marines, where there is 1 million of them at any given time, or a little bit more than 1 million. And to put into perspective the power scaling, if the Custodians wanted to wipe out the Space Marines, they probably could with ease. But that's about it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed. If you have any other questions or suggestions for videos, leave it in the comment below and I will get to it if I can. I might go sleep for 10,000 more years. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.